Welcome to episode 1 of the Clique podcast. We're your hosts, Ryan Ness
and Mike Ness.
And today we're going to talk about our car group that we're kind of starting and the goal behind it, the name behind it, and also I wanted to interview Mike Ness, the actual one of the co-hosts of this podcast, and we're going to see he was going to go over his car build and the inspiration behind it and where he plans to go with it. So we're actually a car group that's based in Lafayette, Indiana. Kind of in the Midwest, so it's a little bit weird for us to be so focused on cars, but nothing wrong with it, honestly. It's good to see things you don't usually see. And
keep your cool cars out when it's not snowy, and get your garbage cars out when it is snowy, yeah.
Spot on, yeah. And so we're focused on styles you don't usually see in the Midwest. Everything from big wings to body kits to lowered cars, and I think Michael's car kind of hits every spot of that, so I just wanted to talk about it. So what is the car that you drive?
I drive a 2002 Lexus IS300. It's not the wagon or anything, it's just the regular sedan, but I wanted to go for more of a sedan because I liked them and they weren't as rare. And even though they are rare to find around here, I managed to find it with only 140,000 miles on it. It was about a 5-hour drive there, 5-hour drive back.
Where'd we find that at?
Found it in Montgomery, Illinois.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Rust belt right there.
Rust belt right there. And it is a little rusty. I'm working on fixing up the rocker panels and stuff like that. When I got the car, the condition was the transmission was leaking, all the brake calipers were seized up, it was leaking tons of oil. And so we were able to limp it back to the house and get to work on it. Now I've been dealing it for a couple months, and I've done a little bit of work on it in the last couple months.
And what was I remember when you first brought that car home. I mean, we made a road trip for it because I know you had your eyes on the IS line for a while. I mean, Lexus, they've done a great job. I mean, for anyone out there who doesn't know, this is kind of it's one of the best drift cars out there, even though it comes mainly with an automatic transmission. It's really hard to find it with a manual transmission, even though a lot of people do like cars with a manual transmission. But he had his eyes on these cars for a while, and he hit me up one day and said, "Hey, there's this car in Illinois. We need to go get it." And I said, "Awesome." And the price lined up perfectly. How much did you get that for?
$2,500.
$2,500 with 140,000 miles,
yeah,
and very
lowest I've ever seen in Indiana.
Absolutely insane.
Outside Indiana, even like in the general area, all of them are over 200,000 miles now.
And you've kind of caught my eye with that. You've probably caught me a couple times looking for those things online, and it's crazy because you look on Facebook Marketplace, and that's one of those cars. Like a lot of the JDM cars that people enjoy, they drive the crap out of them, and you can't find them under 200,000 miles.
Well, even dealers around this area and in Florida, they're saying they can't keep them on the lots for more than 2 weeks.
Oh, it's absolutely
insane. The second
insane.
they get one, they'll sell it.
Yeah, so I remember we went to go and check that out, and we met in like a Walmart parking lot or something with the seller.
Yeah,
really great guy.
Picked it up, but it was had eBay shocks, had all the issues with it, huge muffler leak and Y pipe leak, so it sounded like a truck.
Wow.
But yeah, we limped it back to the house. I started working on it, got some different suspension on it, fixed the transmission, fixed the leaking engine, and then got to work on the body kit. I got the body kit. It's a wide body. I think it's about 30 millimeters in the front and about 40 or 50 in the back.
What brand did you go through for that body kit?
I went for Monster Service. They're located in Russia, so I knew the shipping times would be a little long, but they were a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. And so I had the kit in maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and I was able to get hardware and just start cutting up the fenders.
Wow. And that's kind of crazy because, like, I think back to when you first looked at that car, you first wanted to get that car, and it's crazy because we kind of, like, I kind of knew in my mind I wanted to do something with just representing the older Japanese cars mainly, but also just the styles that nobody else sees. And I think it really came together with the focus of Clique, honestly. And I remember you talking to you about that, and you said, "Hey, yeah, we need to do this." And so we, that car, just the idea behind that car really, really was the catalyst for, like, starting this. And so it's pretty crazy to think back on that.
Yeah.
And so, well, I remember when you first brought that car home, is instantly transmission work because it was having that leak. And that's just something you can't drive with.
That's a known leak to happen with those specific transmissions. I had to get with an automatic transmission because I was sort of I wanted to have enough money to still be able to do fun stuff with it, but I wanted to also not put too much money into it so that I would feel bad if I started cutting off parts of it and drilling holes for wings, cutting off parts for cutting the fenders off. essentially
yeah.
all of the fender on the front for the body kit. And so I wanted to get something lower on the price point, but I knew I would still be able to drive it for a long time. So that fit the criteria perfectly.
One with any car, the second you start cutting into it, the one concern you have, especially here in the Midwest, is rust. I mean, you set a car outside and it'll rust. Even just bare metal, it'll rust.
Yeah.
Don't even need to worry about waiting for the winter for that. And so, I mean, especially in our area, we get some pretty rough winters, and so it's definitely something you have to consider. And I remember back, I mean, for anybody who's local here, they probably have seen the car around, or at least seen the wing around, because the wing's really made a name for itself. And honestly, like that's the interesting thing about Ultra Clique too is, from the start, the focus was loud cars, really something loud,
something that you don't see anywhere else, something that you can really say, "Hey, did you see this?"
Yeah.
Like, what? There's one of those local?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I can't think of how many conversations I've had with people here locally, and they say, I'm talking about a car, and they're like, "Oh, which one is it? Oh, I've seen that white one around, or this blue one around," and stuff like that. And you're like, "No, it's the one with the big wing, orange tips." And they're like, "Oh, I know which one you're talking about."
Yeah, because in this area, the only other wide bodies that are even here, there's a STI that's white, and it's wide body. It looks really clean, and it's a newer one, which that's a pretty crazy wide body to do.
Oh,
and then
it's insane.
There's a GTR, but I didn't see any representation of, I guess, the more street style oriented stuff, because those two cars, they're basically stock. I wanted to go sort of all the way with mine. I wanted to do the full wide body, the crazy blast pipes on the back. I wanted to go with the big wing. I wanted to go with the crazy wheels, and just sort of complete the whole thing instead of just going with just the body kit. I wanted to go a little deeper into it.
Well, your build has been something that's it's been going on a long time, because you started back with your Acura RSX, and that's where you first got that orange wing off that guy.
Yeah, I got majority of my parts actually from my RSX. I got the wing and the wheels, and I just wanted to make something really crazy with that car. And then I saw another car, and I was like, "Hey, these wheels fit perfect. This wing fits perfect. I can do a lot with this new chassis." And so I decided that I wanted to go with that chassis, since it was also rear-wheel drive. I'd been wanting to get a rear-wheel drive car for a while, and so I just wanted to pick that up, see what I could do with it, and just make something a little different than most people see around here.
Well, it's wild too, because the way that you went about it, I don't see it too extremely often where people will buy parts incrementally and transfer them beyond builds. Because like what people will tend to do is they'll buy a car.
And they'll buy very specific parts for that car.
Yeah, they buy specific parts, which isn't the end of the world. I mean, most cars, like when you buy the suspension and the coilovers and stuff like that, just getting specifics here, no matter what, it's going to be designed for that specific car. But when it comes to like some of the cosmetics, to be able to transfer that stuff over, it kind of gives you we talk, car guys, they know why they put an exhaust on their cars, because every car sounds different, and if someone knows what that car sounds like, it's easier to relate to that and say, "Hey, I know who drives that car." But when you have something like a wing, which is even more noticeable than an exhaust, even if the car isn't loud, you still notice that wing. Mm-hmm. And so for you to incrementally transfer that wing between cars, it's kind of been your calling card for every car you've had.
Yeah, just have the huge wing with the orange tips on it, and you can tell what it is from anywhere in traffic, basically.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, we see a couple GTRs around, and that's the thing that's pretty interesting to see, especially here in the Midwest. Is in our area, I never expected to see it, but it's like the last 2 years, it's really blown up seeing the exotics, and yeah, you see those around, and you can say with people, "Oh yeah, did you see that GTR? Oh yeah, did you see that Lotus or that Lambo?" and stuff like that. But for it to be a car that's not exactly like that extremely expensive, so like the IS or like the RSX, like an older Japanese car that's not that expensive, not that valuable, for it to still be noticeable and have kind of a community around that is kind of cool. Just something I've noticed. But you built that over time, and it's pretty wild too, because it all lined up really well with trying to launch Ultra Clique and stuff. And honestly, at the end of the day, Ultra Clique isn't focused around this entire one car, but it was kind of the one thing that started it.
I wanted to get a car that I could do a lot of stuff with and still sort of make it into something that I wanted it to be. There was a lot more aftermarket focus on this specific car. There were a lot more aftermarket parts that I could put on that were a lot more in line with what I had envisioned making a car into.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of other people around here that have that similar vision. I've been trying to sort of create a group for all those people to be in, because most of the groups around here, they're either like just in a straight line, they're all like domestic.
Which is nothing
race
wrong
cars.
with that.
There's nothing wrong with any of the other groups. It's just there wasn't a group for people that just want to go style over function. They aren't trying to go fast. They're just trying to have fun with the car. And majority of the other groups around here, they're either focused on like highway racing with like Camaros and domestics and just crazy high horsepower cars that you can't really have that much fun with if you're not trying to race, or people that do a lot of time attack stuff, which is cool, but you can't really run the same style of stuff where you have crazy lowered cars and huge wheels with a time attack setup. It doesn't really perform like it would otherwise.
It's still cool though to have that kind of representation, because I know that there's a lot of other people in this area that kind of like to have that, like to see that.
Oh yeah.
And so it's neat to be able to have that kind of a group. I know there's the other. It's crazy because like we talk about the IS, and yeah, just like any other Japanese car, it's not a super common car, so it is pretty wild to see other cars like it. But I remember it really helps just having something a little bit more loud and noticeable. It's kind of interesting how far you can go with it. You meet people around, it's just easier to communicate about the car that you have and what you drive, and it's something to talk about. It's a nice talking point. I mean, that's what happens with any car, really. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of interesting, and so we've noticed that over time. It's kind of cool too because back when we started thinking about Ultra Clique and all that, that's when we were introduced to that Lime car group that's here locally. It's really cool to have, because I know that for like the past 4 years we've talked about car groups and stuff like that. They have them on. It's crazy to see how everything's moved from Reddit to not from Reddit, from like forums to like Facebook. Facebook is where everything seems to be like for groups and collectives and stuff. And so, but there's that group Lime that's popped up, and honestly, it was through a recommendation of someone else who had the same car as you. Yeah. Because there's another guy here locally who has a silver IS, and he said, "Hey, there's this car group." I'm like, "Hey, that's awesome." Yeah. So a little shout out to Lime.
Yeah, shout out to Lime. We definitely. It's a great group because they have a lot of diversity there. They have a lot of
Miatas.
They have a lot of Miatas, but they also have a lot of Japanese cars, a lot of USDM cars. They have a lot of domestics. They have all kinds of different cars that show up to meets.
Oh, it's awesome.
But anywhere from the new 2020 Corvettes or whatever to the just like super, super old Civics that have like small block Chevys in them. It's just a really neat mix of all kinds of cars, from drag cars to just street cars to just all kinds of neat builds.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to see the representation of all the things, because it's not often that you see something like that. It's just wild. Yeah. Honestly, that's the thing I really liked, because I remember going to, like, because I remember, well, it wasn't until this past year that we really were able to get into a lot of the meetups and stuff around here locally, but just, I remember it was right after I got my IS and my slow IS, but we had gone to that one meetup.
You got the 250, it's nice to drive.
It's nice to drive, but it's not the fastest thing in the world, and so it's kind of interesting, but that was, there were a couple of people who are actually a part of the Lime group and stuff, and it was crazy because that was when I first got that car, and this was like the first car that we had that could actually keep up, because your IS, we were still working on it.
Yeah, it was on jack stands, and I was trying to get my current wheels to fit on the stock body, which didn't work, and I would have rubbed like crazy, but we were like, we gotta make it to the meet. And then
yeah. And that started out, that was a crazy night too.
Yeah, because we kept trying to get the wheels to fit, and then we're like, no, it's not going to fit. We'll just take the IS250, and
we did.
Yeah,
and it worked out.
Right, yeah.
But that meet was wild too, because we ended up getting there, and there were a couple of people there that are also in like Lime and stuff, which was cool. But that was one of the craziest meets we'd ever been to, because we had never been to one where there were that many interesting and fast cars. And so it was cool to go to that meet, and that one, it started out at Igloo, and then it ended up at the local Igloo, which is usually where these things happen. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Igloo is always one of the best places. I remember back when I had my Prelude taking pictures there, honestly, Igloo, any places that have an Igloo local, that's the best place to take pictures at night, because you have great lighting.
The nice sign in the background, especially for 80s cars, but any car.
Neon lighting is so underrated at the end of the day, honestly. Like, if you have a place with neon lighting, you're golden, because the lighting is just so perfect. It sets you up, and you can just take really great photos of your car. So we ended up getting to Igloo, and I remember it was cool. We were chill, meeting up with people. There were a couple nice cars there, and then people were like, okay, so we're gonna go on a cruise. And I'm like, okay, I've got my IS, and it was actually raining that night too, which made it even more interesting.
So we cruised to Mexico and
Yeah, but we ended up cruising, yeah, to Mexico on the highway. Took the highway all the way there, yeah, and ended up learning that there were quite a few interestingly fast cars on the road, and there were some. There's an STI there that was like full cob setup, beautiful, and that's when I realized that you can kick the back end out on an STI. I didn't know how badly you could, but when it's wet outside and you set that center diff all the way to the rear, you can really kick it out. Yep. And so we got this STI that's squatting up with these this one Mustang that was built and just. Man, running slicks in the rain, the craziest thing.
Oh my gosh, he was trying to grab so much traction.
It's crazy.
It was rough. He had to do a burnout for 2 minutes and still wasn't grabbing traction. It was rough.
But that was kind of our introduction to some of the people who were in line because I don't think Tyler was there, but the other Tyler was there, and so through that meet we met a couple of people that were connected to like Tyler and some of the other people in Lime, and then we ended up starting to go to the meets that Lime was holding at Igloo, which were honestly a lot. Lime is probably the best. I give him so much credit just because they're such a better managed group than any of the others I've seen around here.
Yeah.
And so I've always loved going to their meets and stuff like that just because they're better managed. They tell you the time you're there, and it's great. It's a really cool group. It's really interesting to watch that all kind of grow. And so I think, man, we really bounce Ultra Clique off of Lime's existence, but it's a lot of the people that are in Lime that's kind of inspired just the creation of a group like this. And so we've been focused on trying to get some of those photo shoots into, which has been kind of cool, but it's a little off topic. And so I guess back to the IS though. I mean that's kind of the main focus here is the headliner car of Ultra Clique is Mike's IS. We've been using that for some of our photo shoots that we've put up on our Instagram and stuff. And so I guess do you have any future plans for the IS? I did see a little spool ski up in the garage.
Yeah. I've got some plans to put a turbo in it. I'm gonna be using the stock block, stock internals. It's only on 145,000, so I think I should be good as long as I keep the boost below 8 psi. Right now I got the turbo kit from some guy in Illinois for around 2,000.
Illinois is a spot for cars, even though it's even worse than here in the winter.
Oh my gosh, there were so many crazy imports there.
It's crazy.
I went up there and I was there for 2 hours. I saw 3 Type Rs, all these crazy imports that you just don't. Even the place I went to, it had 2 ISs. 2 first-gen ISs. I saw another first-gen IS in a dealership parking lot as I was leaving.
As in IS300, early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s IS, yeah.
The ones we were talking about, they're really hard to find.
Yeah. And there were just a ton of them there. Every single time we've gone there, we've seen a bunch of those cars there. And so I picked up the turbo kit for about 2,000. It's similar to a CX Racing kit. It's called Ness Power Kit. And it just comes with everything you need to boost the car, basically. The only things I need to pick up are, boost controllers, things like that. Expensive things that I'm sort of saving up to buy because I know it's going to be a pretty big job to put the whole kit in the car and wire everything in and get it tuned to make sure it won't break on me.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that this is the platform I ended up choosing to turbo because I've heard great things about the block, great things about the internals, because everything that Toyota had seemed to build for this specific model of car and the whole 2JZ lineup, they seem to over-engineer everything. So, I mean, my transmission, it holds 220 horsepower right now.
Is that a Supra?
No, it's a completely different engine. The 2JZ in the Supra is completely different than the 2JZ in the IS300s. Even if you get the non-turbo Supra motor from back in the day, it's still different. There's a lot of different things that they did to make it perform differently than the IS motor.
But one of the fun things about that car is when you go to Toyota, because sometimes there's some parts you've had to get for that car that you just can't get really at a parts store, so you have to go to a Toyota dealer to get them.
Or just getting parts numbers, and you just because they don't really have that many Lexus parts unless you ask for their catalog, and so you can usually get parts for cheaper if you go for the 2JZ out of the Supra, out of the Mark IV Supra. And so I've done that a couple times, and it's always interesting to have them look up the Supra, because either you get someone who knows what it is, or you get someone who's like, oh, what's a Supra? And so it's an interesting mix. But yeah, I've got parts I'm basically saving up for right now because it's a pretty big job. The stock transmission can hold anywhere around 300 horsepower. I'm on the automatic transmission just for that purpose of not breaking the transmission the second I throw a boost at it. That was a huge issue with the manual transmissions of this era of IS. Well, the only manual IS you could really get was they got fragile if you threw power at them.
Yeah.
And if you shift them perfectly,
so
even
weird.
still, you can have issues with them blowing up. And so eventually mine will be manual. I'm just trying to weigh the options of which transmission is best for my setup instead of just getting a transmission that's built for 800 horsepower and only boosting it to 3.
That's crazy.
You know? And then the stock engine, the stock block can go up to 1,000 horsepower. Stock internals are good for around, I've seen 300 to 400. I'm wanting to keep it on the conservative side.
I still want to be able to drive it on the street.
I want to be able to street drive it, yeah. Like if it's raining, I don't want to be like fighting to grab traction or anything like that. I want it to be a nice, comfortable car that if I want to, I can put my foot into it and people will be like, what? That 2000s car, where'd it go?
You buy a Lexus for a reason.
Well, I mean, I bought it for the specific reason of the engine being what I wanted it to be, and the interior being a lot nicer than other options that I had been looking at. Because I had looked at 370Zs before, and I looked at BRZs, and I liked how both of those drove, and they are a little sportier. Like the BRZ is a little sportier, and the 350Z has a little more power. But I really wanted to get into something that was a little more on the luxury side, because up until now I've had basically just Hondas that have like no AC. 2 of them had AC.
It's extra power though, right?
Well, oh my gosh.
All that
just
extra
weird issues, and they weren't comfortable. They were super loud all the time, and they were just not nice to drive. And so I was like, well, what were my options here? And so I was looking for cars that had really good engines, really good potential, but also weren't cars that you had to take out the entire interior to be faster.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, which is crazy because, like, when you think of the IS, because, like, I know my IS is the same way. Even though it's a 250, it's a slow one. Man, it's so weird for me to be talking about that as one of the hosts, but on a podcast on a group that's focused on wild cars. But still, like, I focus mainly on the kind of the branding side of Ultra Clique and stuff like that, getting all the photo shoots done and, like, the content management. So I do have the goal of getting to the point of having a car like that, but I guess right now I'm kind of the on the side. I still really, really love the vision and stuff like that, but I'm not at the same point as you are. And so, but it's crazy because I know how much weight there is, especially in the Lexuses compared to, like, you get into a Civic or you get into like a Subaru or really a lot of other cars out there, and when you get into a Lexus, you're like, man, there's so much more weight to this. Like, I remember closing the doors on my car and your car, and
they're
solid.
Terrific.
They sound great,
they
but
sound so good.
But they're really solid and stuff, and so you close the door and you're like, man, I can feel the extra weight this car has. And so you'd think it would hold you back when you're driving, but honestly, if you can back it with power.
If you get the right suspension setup. I remember I was driving with stock, well, not stock, but my eBay springs, and they were bouncy. And then I got some other springs, and they were supposed to ride pretty close to stock. And I had these the front corners would lift at weird times. Like, I'd be going up a hill, taking a left turn, and the left corner would start lifting. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've got weight on this corner. Why is it lifting? And so I finally ended up settling with some BC racing coils. I think they're about 10K in the front, 12K in the back. So pretty conservative. They're harsher than your regular coilovers, but they're pretty conservative. They feel pretty close to stock, just a little sportier. They're nice while you're going over bumps, but the second you need to, like, hit a hard bump or something, they dampen it a lot better than any coilovers I've ever used, which is surprising.
So you've been around the block a bit with coilovers, honestly.
Gosh.
Like
I bought 5 to 6 sets of coilovers in my day.
So I guess for anybody listening to this, if they're in the cars and stuff like that, I'm assuming they'd be into cars. Excuse me. If they're into this, I would assume they're into cars and stuff. And so, since you've been around the block a bit with coilovers, I heard you say something about 10K and like 12K.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
Those are the spring rates.
Okay.
Basically, they measure them in how much the spring can handle on each corner of the car. And you usually have higher spring rates depending on the type of car. You usually have softer spring rates in the rear. But since I had huge rubbing issues with my wing on there, adding downforce or whatever it was doing with the rear, I had issues with that. So I ended up going with stiffer springs in the back and then the softer springs in the front. But they are both, you can adjust the stiffness on all of them. I have all of them set to fully stiff, but you can set them anywhere from stiff to soft. And you can also adjust the preload. I've been sort of messing with the preload in the rear, trying to figure that out, get that squared away.
So you're not bottoming out around every corner.
Yeah, because there's a lot of really sharp dips in the roads around us, even getting onto the local Highway I-65. I mean, there's transitions that you'll just thump.
And how long have they been doing construction on the road?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you
it's
have
pretty
to
wild.
dodge a lot of potholes around here.
Yeah, but it definitely teaches you to think outside the box when you're building your car. I mean, maybe that's why we don't see as many wild cars that we'd hope to see around here, but it's definitely part of it.
Yeah, as long as you want to build it wild, you just have to make sure that you keep it in one piece by looking for potholes and just looking for things that in general you would hit or ramp or,
Definitely.
everything like that.
At the end of the day, you don't have to have a slam setup. I mean, you can still run it like a sport height, but still, it's still, for the appearance, it makes sense. And so, yeah, you've been around the block with the coilovers, and it's definitely been a learning process. But the cool thing about it is, like, I mean, I've ridden in it most recently with those BCs, and oh my gosh, they feel
They're a
great.
night and day difference compared to anything I've had before.
Yeah, definitely a lot smoother.
Everything before that, I'd spent maybe 400 or 600. Maybe my max was 700 on coilovers, and those were a pair of function informed Type 2s, and those were the ones that I had just put on the IS a couple months ago, and I couldn't get them to handle at all. They would bottom out constantly. I tried adjusting the preload as much as I could, and the springs were just way too soft, which is great if you're running in stock height, but if you're running not stock height, you're going to run into issues where it'll lift weird. It'll feel a lot floatier than you want it to be. If you're buying coilovers, most of the time you want it more engaging.
You want to have good handling.
Yeah.
You buy the coilovers to improve your handling, really.
Yeah, and it actually had more body roll with the coilovers I bought for 700 than the eBay coils that I got on its stock, which were super bouncy, but they had less body lean.
And after being around the block a bit with coilovers, having gone through a couple, you kind of get an idea of, oh, this isn't supposed to do this. This isn't supposed to feel like this.
And most of the car purchases I've had in the past, I've either bought something really cheap and learned, oh, I need to buy something that isn't cheap and it'll actually perform. Definitely. I've learned that over and over. You get what you pay for.
Definitely.
If you pay for quality, you're usually going to get quality. And if you don't, then you got the wrong company.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a very wild world when it comes to coilovers.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, so with the IS, it's definitely a build that's coming along real nice. It's a great kind of, I guess, main...
It's a nice daily drift car.
Yeah.
Because it drives totally fine, but if you want to kick it out in a parking lot, it's totally capable.
Of course, in it's a closed
course parking lot, yes.
Make sure that's noted.
Yeah.
We're responsible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great car, great handling, great cruiser. Honestly, at the end of the day, keeping the auto isn't the end of the world.
No, it's much more smoother than any of the other cars that I've had in the past.
Don't have to be as careful with the transmission.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I don't have to worry about money shifting the crap out of it. If I'm going up onto 65, I don't have to worry about going from like 5th to 2nd or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it's just nice after, working all day. You don't want to worry about a clutch or shifting everything. You can just cruise, and if you really want to get a little sporty,
Jeez, what a luxury.
If you really want to get sporty with it, it's got the E-shift buttons on each side. It's got an up button on the front, down button on the back, and so you can basically just
shift one-handed.
Shift one-handed on each side, yeah.
Which is pretty wild. You don't see that much. Even in Porsches, like, they don't have
Most
that.
of them just have the plus on the right side, minus on the left side, and that's all you get. Yeah.
To be able to do it with one hand. I mean, I guess it's, man, that's weird to think about though, because it's like, you'd think that, I guess the whole approach of the paddles is so it's more engaging. You have your hands on the wheel, but then like,
Oh, I have like one hand on the wheel and I'm just bumping through the gears. It's all good.
I guess if it works, it works.
Yeah.
It's just a weird way of thinking about it. It's definitely very interesting. But yeah,
especially in a 2000s car.
Yeah,
I was blown away when I saw that was included in all models because I didn't know if that was a trim thing or I knew that it was a thing in the models. I didn't know if that was in all of them, and I wanted to see how it all worked because I was figuring, oh, okay, so this transmission is going to be a slush box because it's an auto. It's going to be trying to pick gears the entire time.
Yeah.
But no, it's very direct with which gears it wants, and if you're in auto mode and you want to speed up, it'll drop a gear in a couple seconds and you can speed up. It really drops the gears hard though. That's the thing I realized was, and depending on the different regions in the actual transmission, there's like a little dial that you can select the stiffness of the shifts, and I think they had different settings for different regions. So in the US, I think it was at like a 2, somewhere, well, in the US it's at a 2, and like Europe it's at like a 1, and that's what people have sort of messed with in the past with the autos, is just messing with the shifting and actually adding extra shims into the different oh man, it's automatic transmissions are complicated. I don't really want to break mine open.
Yeah.
But people are out there modifying them to make them shift harder, shift better, handle power.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff.
I mean, at the end of the day, the entire goal, at least from the manufacturer's point of view, and honestly, the enthusiast also, I mean, most people, if you've driven a manual transmission and an auto, I mean, this isn't anything new to most people who have done both, but the entire end goal of, I guess, the more modern automatic is to try and get it as close to the feel of the driving experience for a manual transmission as you can get it.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty interesting to see that change over time. Now it's going to be challenged with EVs and stuff like that. But, I mean, those are great straight line power, so I don't think people are as concerned when it comes to those. That's a little off topic, though. But it's just kind of interesting to see how that changes over time. And it was really interesting to see that in a 2000s car, you've got that kind of technology.
It's a very capable car for the price I got it for.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah, for $2,500, and it has basically all the options you could get in the US version for that year. Like, it's got sunroof, it's got the
limited
full
slip.
Stereo system, limited slip. That was a very rare thing to find, because most time people will they'll buy one with a open diff, and then they'll have to buy one off a BRZ and throw it in, or try to find one off another IS and throw it in. But I happened to get one that had limited slip, had all the other options that you could basically get for that year, aside from like weird accessory things of the interior, but for all the trim options, it was very well set up.
It's like you didn't even know until after you bought it that it had an LSD in it, right?
No.
It's crazy.
I had to do a burnout to figure it out.
On a close course, of course.
On a close course, yeah. But, yeah.
That's a pretty wild car. I've ridden in it, and I know kind of the experience of it. I've only driven it maybe once or twice, but I know from the passenger point of view, that car is a very comfortable and capable car.
Yeah. Powered seats. Never had that before. All my seats have been on rails.
It's nice to have all the luxuries. I mean, honestly, if you can get a car, I think most people will argue that if they can get comfort at the same time as sport and not have to sacrifice that much on the handling and performance side of things.
Because, of course, you can buy a Civic all day for like a couple $100, like the shell, throw a motor in it, and like gut the interior, and yeah, you can beat Lambos, but it's going to be so loud, it's going to handle really crazy, because it's got so much power going to the front wheels.
And it's so light.
And then your passenger is going to be like, why is your car this loud? And of course, it's not going to be like your daily car, but if people do set them up to be your daily car, why not like make your fun car still comfortable to ride in, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the entire goal of that car seems to be like the perfect daily driver that can still be fun.
Yeah, you can have fun in the corners, you can turn on the E-shift, or if you have the manual mode, you can still have fun with it, turn off traction control, all the bits and pieces, just to having fun with the car.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly balanced with the power that it comes stock with, that you really don't have to, if you don't want to, you don't have to do more with it.
I mean, definitely the experience of the car is pretty different than a lot of other cars that you find out there. I know that driving that compared to the car that I drive, which mine is a little bit more, I mean, mine's like maybe 5 years newer than yours, and still the comfort is, there's not really a difference. And so, as in, it's really good comfort for the age of the car and for what the car was focused on.
The interior is held amazing. Like, the only issue it even has on the interior is just the sticky dash issue, which they had tons of issues with because they used a weird experimental material. And
on like the first gens and the second gens, like I have a sticky dash on my car. You gotta get a third gen if you don't want to have to deal with that. Yep. But third gens are like $20K or more.
All the trim pieces are in like mint condition. Like when I looked in the car when I first got it, I was like, this thing looks like people have barely used it.
Yeah.
Like the steering wheel just had light wear on the top. All the buttons were still there. There weren't any cracks in the dash. Weren't any cracks in the AC vents. Everything was just exactly as you'd want it to be. Lexus floor mats, and they looked barely used too. Like
it's just crazy. Everything
about the car looked very lightly used. No rips or tears.
Well, and they aren't even all weather floor mats. They're like the cloth
ones
that you would get with the car from factory. Like they're in like perfect condition.
They held up really well.
I mean, yeah, it's from Illinois, and the guy. I'm pretty sure previous owners drove it through the winter and stuff. It's a great all-year car for being rear-wheel drive and everything. And so I guess it is kind of understandable that all the stuff is in the interior is in good condition. It had good owners and stuff, and so that held up. And maybe it's got a little bit of rust on the rear quarters, but it's also an 18-year-old car.
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes sense.
18 years old, and most of the stuff's still holding up. The engine's still running great.
Yeah, it's a wild car. Definitely a cool build, and it's interesting to see where it's going. It'll be neat to see what happens when you get that turbo on there. I'm eager to get to ride in that car when you get that turbo in there. It'd be really neat. And it's great to talk about the car.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Basically the headliner car.
I really wanted to cover a little more information on that because up until now we just had photos and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I wanted to clear it up because that's one of the main cars we do for photo shoots, just for the Instagram and stuff like that. And we should have a website launching soon too for Clique. And honestly, like when we talk about this car, it's not the main focus of Clique. Like I'd like to be able to, and I know Michael does too. Like we'd like to be able to feature other cars as well, local cars on the website and stuff. In the Instagram and show it off. Honestly, get a nice collection, like a group. It is. I mean, the main focus is a car group. It'd be really cool to showcase. I mean, going back to what the main focus was, styles that you don't see usually in the Midwest and honestly anywhere. Big wings, body kits, and lowered cars, and it's not just restricted to that. Like good styles are definitely great, and I mean we're pretty open about any cars that we like. I mean, we aren't like super hardcore curators of content or anything like that.
No, we don't curate by any means. But anyone that really likes what types of cars we are running, if they want to be part of the group, we're totally open for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing we've noticed is, honestly, that's like one of the main styles it seems like a lot of people are going for these days all those things. And so it's really neat to have Mike on the podcast, and he'll be on the podcast in the future too. I mean, he's the co-host, but it was neat to talk with him about the car, get a little bit more information so that we can kind of give a background story to the images that we've posted so far on the Instagram, and also any content that might be posted on the page. So, I mean, that was the main focus of this episode. In upcoming episodes, I think it'd be cool. We talked about covering like car news and stuff. I know I'm really interested in like technology, since that's a big thing in cars these days, and so. Huge. And it'd be awesome, too, to maybe even have some people on, maybe from Lime or local groups, just anybody who's interested in cars and wants to kick it back and talk about cars. It's pretty awesome, and it's awesome that we have that around us in the area. But yeah, I mean, that was the focus of this first episode. I just wanted to cover all those things, and that's pretty much it. I think we're shooting for mainly Sundays, trying to record these the podcast episodes. So probably come back next Sunday and maybe talk about some car news. Maybe talk about a local car, something like that. Yeah, but it's good to have you on, Mike, and talk about the IS and the vision behind Clique and all those things. Hopefully that cleared it up for anybody who's curious about where all that's going.
Yeah. It's definitely a car that I plan to keep building.
I'm sure you do.
For sure.
That thing's a gem. Those things, I mean, they're going up in, like every Japanese car, they kind of just go up in value over time.
Yep.
Definitely getting rarer and rarer.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. Great to talk about the IS, the vision of Clique, and see you guys next week.